Welcome to Interior Analysis. I'm Evan Westman,
I'm Jelani T. Kelly.
and today we're talking about Logan, and we're joined by host of the Film Nuts podcast, Taylor D. Adams.
Hey guys, thanks so much for having me. I'm excited.
Yeah, excited to have you. And I didn't know you had that there, but you just flashed your Film Nuts mug. If you want to go for the YouTube,
I do need to sell these things. I I literally have 2 mugs, and I should probably make more and sell them.
Yeah, we could probably do with that. I think I own the only merch that we've ever sold. And then maybe
I don't
my
have
dad. I think
anything.
that's what.
I've been here for like 3-4 years.
You don't have
Probably
anything?
4. It's been
Evan, 4.
Yeah, well, as co-host, yeah, it's been like 4.
Mm-hmm. I think it's been 5 since your first appearance, but 4, a little more than 4 since co-hosting.
And I have nothing from us. You're 0 for 3, Evan.
I'm 0 for 3. I got to do better with this. But anyway, we're here to talk about Logan, which so I'll let Jelani get into it second because I know you love this. But Taylor, when I asked you to come on the show, this was the movie that you decided to pick. So why did you want to talk about this one?
Yeah, so it's kind of funny that I ended up picking this one. I didn't even think in my head that Wolverine and Deadpool is coming out in a month or whatever. I wasn't even thinking about that. But just for funsies, I decided to go way back and watch all the Wolverine movies. Nice. Just to kind of just track things. Because I've only ever seen these movies in real time when they came out. And going through my Wolverine Odyssey, I loved this movie when it came out. I saw it twice in the theaters. And this most recent time, I broke down crying really hard at the end. I think there was a lot going on in my life, but for some reason, every time I've watched this movie, nothing misses. I don't bump on a thing. Everything is really clicking. Even some things that some people might bump on that are kind of small. It doesn't bother me at all. And I think I've always Wolverine's always been my favorite X-Men character. And because of that too, I've become a fan of Hugh Jackman. I'm not haven't seen all his movies or anything like that, but everything I've seen him in, I admire. Except for Origins. I actually skipped Origins when I was watching, when I was going through my Odyssey. I really watched the opening scene and then I was like, nope, I know what happens from here. I'm going to stop watching. Yeah. But yeah, I think this movie is it's so fascinating to think it came out 7 years ago. I feel like it tried to say something about the superhero genre and the superhero movie making studios haven't really learned the lesson from it yet. So I'm always down to talk about this movie.
Nice. And Jelani, I think you've gone on record. Am I remembering it right? Because I know Wolverine's not your top superhero, but he's your top Marvel one, right?
No, that's Miles.
Oh,
nice.
I actually talk about that in my initials, so I'm gonna do my initial stuff. If that's all right. So I saw this in theaters the day after opening night, a Friday. So normally movies like this come out on Thursday nights, midnight releases. Junior year of college with a couple of friends. We were late to showing up to the film because of me and my friend Mike. Shout out to Mike. I think he's still in Canada, but he's working his dream job doing working for an animation company. Me and him had to go to the Philly Museum of Art for a project or something. I think it was for a paper. Was it? It was art history. And this is back when the nearest theater to us did not have preferred seating. So unfortunately, being late to a Marvel movie, we had to sit up front. The very front.
That's great.
Oh man.
I think that's the first and only time I've had to sit in the front row. We broke our necks the entire time to watch the movie. And that is the only time I remember needing to move my entire head to see something happening on the other side of the screen. I don't recommend that experience.
I've had it a couple times. I don't recommend either.
So bad. Like
thankfully for worse movies, but
I had to put my head down at certain points because my neck started hurting. It's bad. Those seats should not be there.
Yeah.
But anyway, I haven't seen the movie since. This is my second time seeing it. Why? Maybe because I felt like I got what I needed out of it in one viewing. Plus, knowing spoilers, knowing he dies in the end, I didn't really want to see it again.
Zoinks.
Yeah, I've seen clips on it and videos on it after, but I don't think that doesn't really count as a second viewing. To your point earlier, Evan, Wolverine is in my top 5 favorite superheroes. I had to make a list to be sure. It's in my notes. And yeah, he's only beaten out by Red Hood. Superman is number 3. I didn't think he'd be that high, but he's top 3. And then Miles Morales, Spider-Man / Spider-Man, because he's still technically Spider-Man. I like both Spider-Man. I just have them in the same slot. And then Static Shock is at the top. Not only is Wolverine dope, but there's something. What draws me to him is, one, he's immortal. That's really cool. Just not dying. That's what's up. 2, like, there's something cool to me about like a character that never parts with their weapon / ability. Like, having the claws built into him is like comforting. I don't think that's not the right word, but that's what I came up with when I wrote this. Then you have someone like Thor or Wonder Woman who can easily lose their weapon. Thor can call it back to him, but how many times in the comics has he been separated from his weapon? Yeah, they can fight without them, but that's like their thing. So Wolverine's claws are kind of in the same vein to me as like Scorpion and his spear from Mortal Kombat. So yeah, top 5.
Okay. I think for better or worse, like this movie a bit less than you guys. I don't dislike it. I still, 3.5 out of 5 stars with a like on Letterboxd. Nobody shoot me. But this is our first time talking about X-Men, and I think I'd probably put this third favorite behind Days of Future Past and First Class, but it's kind of, I really like both of those. Like, those are probably both, like, this is not in my top 10 superhero movies. Those two probably are. Like, Days of Future Past might be my favorite non-Spider-Verse superhero movie. It's close with Amazing Spider-Man 1. I'd have to check back with both of those, but it's high up there. I do still really like this, though. I did not see it in theaters. I saw it like my first week or so of college in a friend's dorm room with a few other people. And then I think I watched it again maybe like 2 years ago on a plane for some reason. I just decided that was the time to revisit it. I don't know. I don't remember why. But
that's a gamble. A plane movie is a gamble because you don't even know if you're getting the whole movie.
Yeah, but I'd already seen it. So I was like, it was a long flight too. I think it was like a 10-hour flight. I probably watched it. I think I did that and the Iron Giant on that flight, I want to say. So it was one new and one old. Okay. Or one rewatch and one new watch. Anyway, it's hit better for me this time. I did it in a weird order because I wanted to just make sure I got this rewatched solidly before we did this so I could get my notes in place. But I did finally watch Origins and The Wolverine over the past few nights. So I didn't do it in order. I went Origins, Logan, The Wolverine. I just finished that last night. Yeah, they're not great, but I think I'm glad I did it because it gave me some I like vaguely knew what happened in both of those movies, but it did give some context. And I have some more notes on that later. 2 other notes before we jump into the topics. One is just Daphne Keane. I don't know if we're going to bring her up in other topics. She's fantastic in this movie. And if you want more of her, I think she's in. I've heard this show is not going well so far. I think she's in the new Star Wars show, The Acolyte.
Acolyte?
Oh, really?
I think so. Yeah, because I saw
might
her.
Watch it now.
I mean, she's a good enough actor that I mean, I'm sure she's good in it, but it'd be far from the first time that a good actor isn't a bad thing. I do recommend his Dark Materials on Max because I've seen all of that, and she shows is a very different character, but she gives one of the best possibly the best child actor performance I've ever seen in that. I think she's really good at it. Only other note, this may be one of the things you were talking about that people bumped on. And this is really stupid. I'm not the first person to bring this up. But really, was Gabriella vlogging everything?
Yes. She could have been a Sundance winner. I tell you, man, she was making this like really like detailed expose documentary on corporate like corruption.
Right. Like
it had editing.
Editing. It was so good. I was like, this woman what could have been going places.
And like did the
while they were
voiceover.
That was wild.
Yeah, and like it's good steady cam, like handheld work, which I mean obviously because they want it's there for exposition work, but like the movie is kind of
she had a GoFundMe. She started a GoFundMe to get this project picked up.
Or had like I don't know what you call that rig that you put like where you have the steady cam like on your body. I don't know what
I know what
it's called.
Easy rig.
Like, yeah, that thing. It's there for exposition. I'm like kind of fine with it. But the movie is kind of asking you to buy that she spent like months and then while on the run with Laura, went through all of the B-roll, picked the right clips, did voiceover, and like put that all together just so Logan would be up to speed.
As someone who used to have to make a half-hour sports documentary every week, you're editing every day. She's editing every day up until she knew it was like her last days are coming. She's like, let me do this voiceover real quick.
Just in case.
Yeah.
And knows that it's for Logan.
Yes.
Well, maybe that came later, but like it was for... Anyway, I just think it's a little bit goofy.
It is like, you think about it. If you think about it, it is goofy. But if you just like, whatever, suspension of disbelief, it's fine.
Yeah. Yeah. But it doesn't help that like he's watching it on her phone, so you're like, okay, this is like she has that much storage too. Like, what is her data plan? Like, she can just have hours worth of B-roll on there.
It's so great.
It's stupid, but it all like the movie does ask you to believe. Anyway, let's start with your topic, Jelani: accessibility in superhero movies.
Yeah.
Unless you guys had more initial reactions, I didn't want to step on those at all.
No, that was it. So my topic is accessibility with superheroes. When I say accessibility, I mean people who aren't familiar with the characters. This movie works as a standalone because you very much don't need to watch any other X-Men film to enjoy it. You guys did, but it's not needed. It's not really connected to any of them because you could really just start with this as an X-Men film and you're good. That's it. I've heard the theory that X-Men Origins Wolverine and the Wolverine all branch through this specific timeline, and this is the end of that. So this could work as a trilogy, but I'm perfectly fine with it not being equated to those two movies. I honestly don't think you even need to be aware of the X-Men at all, but at this point, who isn't? And over the course of my rewatch, I tried to watch it from the lens of someone who is unfamiliar with the source material of the X-Men, but that was straight up just impossible. So I can only make assumptions that this movie is good to people unfamiliar with the X-Men because they reference, the comics in the movie. So why this works as a standalone? It's a Western movie with superheroes in it. They reference the movie. I've never seen it, but apparently this really draws heavily from Shane, I believe it's called. An old Western. I think the only Western I've ever seen is The Good, the Bad, the Ugly. But I like seeing movies or TV shows like this where they approach it as something else first and then throw the superhero stuff around it. For example, or the best example is Into the Spider-Verse, my favorite movie of all time, is a coming-of-age story wrapped in a Spider-Man cloth. There you got the leap of faith that could mean a bunch of things. So further into this, you guys feel free to cut me off. I don't have a ton left for this topic. So, this was nominated for Best Adapted Screenplay because it was based on the Old Man Logan comic, but it's close to nothing like the comic. I remember seeing a couple. Shout out to Comic Stir, and he passed away recently. Rest in peace. But I remember watching videos on the first couple of Old Man Logan comic issues, and I'm glad they didn't go the comic route for this movie because it might not have been as accessible to the general public. Couple of major differences. One, it's post-apocalyptic. Based on like the wallpaper behind me and stuff, I thought it would be, but this is like there's no apocalypse to happen. It's in the future, definitely, because you got the auto trucks and a bunch of other things, but and mutants have died, but an apocalypse technically didn't happen. Two, in the comics, there is an incestuous version of the Hulk, and I'll leave it at that.
Okay.
Yep. I'm glad
that raises a lot of questions that I probably don't want answered.
You don't want the answers. So yeah, all that to say, this it's not really best adapted screenplay, but not much like the comic at all. Except the fact that Logan's old. So this came out in 2017, and by then the MCU was on and popping. This specific movie got 93% on Rotten Tomatoes, 77% on Metacritic, 8.1 out of 10 on IMDb, 3.5 out of 5 by Evan Westman himself. With
the rating that really matters, right?
Yeah, out of all of those, yes. These ratings and the facts that superheroes were cool to like by this point in time make me question how this would have been received in the early 2000s, like when the first X-Men movie came out. If you guys have any guesses, feel free. Like, how would this compare to something a little more out there like Guardians of the Galaxy as far as acceptance and critical awareness go, do you think?
I think for what this movie does and what it's trying to say, if you took this exact thing and put it 10 years sooner, I don't think it would hit as hard. Mostly because I think the way that, yes, it's an adapted story, but the way it was written and the way that things happen, and there's all kinds of symbolism stuff going on. Like, it's very much kind of a critique of the superhero genre anyway. And by then we weren't tired of it because Iron Man hadn't even come out 10 years ago. It was like 1 year later, but still, or not 10 years ago, from 10 years prior to when this movie came out. So I think that this was a response to possibly audiences growing tired. Not too tired yet because Endgame and Infinity War hadn't even come out yet, but we were getting close. But it was also really refreshing to, like, this movie had like stakes. Like, somebody dies at the end of it, and it's somebody that we've known for years, and there's no loophole yet of another dimension stuff where we can just bring back whoever we want to. So I think that this movie, when it came out, was like the perfect time for it to come out. Like, even if it had come out, like, let's say after Endgame or Infinity War, I don't think. I mean, they're not related at all, other than the genre, because the MCU wasn't really kind of clicking like that. But yeah, I just wouldn't have the same impact, I don't think.
Yeah, I think that's all fair. Like, I think there's a couple of years in there that it could have like hit approximately like 2016, 2017. I don't know that those are like too different. But I was thinking when you first posed the question, Jelani, like if it's early 2000s, I think it would depend if it's pre or post Dark Knight. Because I think not that like there's a ton of influence, but the Dark Knight was partly a big deal because of like where it differed from superhero movies at the time. And I think that's had some pretty obvious influence on stuff since then. So maybe this would have like if you take this exact movie, put it out in 2007, I think it probably has a very different place in like the how people think of it, and definitely influences what comes after. Like even if the Dark Knight comes out exactly the same, like if like say they're in production at the same time and this gets a Christmas 06 or Christmas 07 release, Dark Knight still comes out in July. Like I think that has a tangible impact. I don't know exactly what. It's pretty hard to say. Also, it's like we all know my feelings on the rating system, but it does matter that this is R and that The Dark Knight's PG-13 in that equation. And I think it matters for this too, because like as is stated in both Deadpool movies, Deadpool is the only other like R-rated superhero movie that people are trying at all at this time. And let's be real, Deadpool is a movie for 14-year-olds. It is not a movie for adults. Like, and I'll talk about that a bit more.
We're 14-year-olds at heart, at least.
Yeah, like I was thinking about this with I don't want to jump to my topic with it, but I was thinking about this with it. Like, Deadpool is the movie you like watch in secret at a sleepover when you're in 8th grade. And this like
the movie you're not supposed to watch.
Right. Yes.
Yeah.
Like that's who that's for. That's what that's for. And like, I think some 14-year-olds might do that with this movie, but they're not going to have as good of a time because like this is not made. This is like the only, I think to this day, pretty much the only superhero movie that is made really squarely for an adult audience. And maybe that's why they were trying to make it more accessible, because to like point to what you're getting at with this topic, Jelani, I think yes, this does stand on its own really well. Like, correct me if I'm wrong, the thing that like causes the apocalypse in this, as I understood it, is like Professor X had like an aneurysm, or like he had his dementia. Yeah, and I guess that like killed a lot of mutants somehow. It didn't seem super clear, but that's not in any of the movies, right? Like that is new information for everyone.
Yeah, that's new.
Okay. I was pretty sure. I think I've seen everything before this except Last Stand at this point. So I was pretty sure.
What about Watchmen? Was that made for adults? I don't know.
Oh yeah. Honestly, Watchmen does matter here. I forgot about Watchmen. I think on paper, yes, but it's Zack Snyder. So
I was gonna say.
Yeah. But yeah, that's interesting to bring up with this though, because if Watchmen is like done more in, because I think spiritually this is a lot more like the Watchmen comic than this than like the actual Watchmen movie is. Like, it's wow, that kind of throws things off because I completely forgot about Watchmen when I was thinking about this.
Do you need a minute?
I'm just going to rewrite all my notes. Yeah, did you guys want to go off of that? I have a bit more, but
we can keep going.
Was also keep going. R-rated, but also Zack Snyder. That's funny. The Suicide Squad was R-rated, the new one.
Yeah, but that's post.
You could argue that's Oh yeah, that too.
Yeah, but I think just like the setup of all of the characters is like, for one thing, there's only 2 returning characters, so you're missing minimal context there. Like everyone else is new, and they're both in like, regardless of what the last X-Men movie you saw was, they're in completely different places that have nothing to do with, like, I can't even tell what timeline this is. Like you said, apparently the Wolverine movies are all the same one, but
it's possible. I don't know.
Yeah, where does Days of Future Past fit in with that? Like, is this in, like, we don't know. And
they don't even mention really any mutants by name that are in the movie. Like, I think it's just Professor X, Wolverine, and Caliban, and they don't mention anybody else that died or anything like that. So you really,
yeah.
I want to say like Logan may maybe says Jean while he's like having a nightmare or something, but that's like, I mean, that again, I like rewatched him, so that could have been like the one before it or something.
Yeah, you might be getting that confused with the Wolverine because he says it a lot. I'm not saying he doesn't say it here; he just says it a lot.
Right. But even if he does do that, like in this movie, that's not something that the audience really needs to know, like almost who that is, because you can tell through context that's someone he cared about because he's clearly having like a nightmare about it or something like that. So yeah, like with this being pretty self-contained, I mean, what helps that is, like you said, the minimal amount of characters and just I mean, we all almost like we kind of know who Wolverine is, like through the ether, because he's just like a pop culture kind of thing, and by association, probably Professor X. But other than that, like, yeah, there's nothing in this movie that you would need to understand in order to like really figure out what's happening with the story.
Yeah, I wonder, like, when you said earlier, like, Jelani, you tried going into this as if you'd never seen any. I think it is really hard to, like, because you basically have to erase, like, the fact that you know who Wolverine is. And I don't know if there's anyone who's watched this movie who has that perspective, but I think it doesn't expect you to have seen any specific other X-Men movie. It does kind of feel like it expects you to know who Logan and Professor X are. Like, it doesn't explain that he can heal himself. It shows you, so you pick it up after like a couple scenes of that probably. But the fact that he's not healing as fast as he used to, I'm not sure if you could like infer that from what's in this movie. Like, I think it expects you to know that. And like when Charles is like freezing everyone with his brain, if you've seen any other X-Men movie with him in it, I think he does that in basically every other one.
Yeah.
But it doesn't give you, like, that might be bumpy for somebody who comes into this knowing nothing. I think it's a pretty safe bet. That's a super small percentage of the audience, though.
I wonder how somebody like my mom would view this movie, because she's never seen it, but she knows who Hugh Jackman is. She took me to see Infinity War. She's taken us to see No Way Home. She's a fan of like other types of movies along the same, like she's a big fan of like the John Wick movies, the action heavy stuff. Like it would be interesting to get her take on it.
I feel like she needs a guest spot on here.
Yeah.
Once a month.
Yeah, that's for Patreon.
She's part of the Patreon, so yeah.
We'll each find a movie to bring one of our parents on for. Because honestly, though, I was thinking about like showing like this to my mom as well, because she like it sounds like from what you're saying she knows less action movies than yours, but like I don't know if she knows. If I said Wolverine, I don't think she would know who that is. Like, So I think that might be interesting. Even my dad might not. I'm sure he knows who Wolverine. Actually, I'm not sure that he does. He's very not nerdy like that. So maybe not. But that's like I think you could still show it to somebody like that and they would get something out of it though.
Right.
There is like character context missing there. Like you don't know that Logan's something like 170 years old if you just watch this movie. I don't know how close that is, but he's like
I feel like you're in the ballpark.
Yeah, because
he's close to 200. He's definitely close to 200.
Right,
because this is 2029, and he fought in the Civil War. I think that was the first war he was in. So he was born somewhere in the early 1800s.
Yeah, so it's a couple. There's a couple centuries or close to it in there, and I think there's amnesia at some point, or maybe a couple, depending on the timeline. But you don't know that coming into like if you're coming into this like not knowing that, you might think he's like 50, which is not the same, and you just don't have the context of like how many fatal wounds he's endured over those 2 centuries, and the fact that like he's actually dying. Like, just how do you guys think? Because I feel like that's the major thing. Like, do the deaths of Charles and Logan, like, do those hit really? If you're a first time viewer, do we think?
I think so. I don't think they're going to hit as hard. Because for people who've been following these characters for, it was, close to 20 years, like that obviously is going to have a different impact than somebody who maybe doesn't know who these people are, but still watches a movie that's, basically a Western, a survival Western about, a grumpy old man and his grumpy old father figure trying to save this girl. I feel like that inherent family dynamic is there, and you can kind of understand what's going on between the characters. And so when those older figures die, like there's an emotional response to that. I mean, like I said earlier, it's not going to be as heavy if you don't have like your own personal background with the characters, but I still feel like they hit enough because within the movie itself, it says how important these people are to each other.
Yeah, the work is definitely there.
I'm with Taylor on this. I don't think it hit as heavy. I definitely think, not to make it a comparison, but to compare them, I think Logan's death would definitely hit harder, not just because he's the main character, but his connection to Laura. I was going to call her X-23, but I mean, she technically is that in this movie. But yeah, the grumpy old man child trope has been going strong for a while, and I think it's been a trope for a reason. So I think killing the grumpy old man at the end, I think would affect a lot of people who aren't even familiar with him. That's, and then she it almost got me when she called him dad. I was like, you mother.
How dare you?
Yeah, try to evoke emotions out of me.
I think it might have hit for me, except that I'd heard that like at some, because I watched it a few months after it came out, and I'd like heard about that. So I was like, I think if that had been a surprise, that might have hit better for me.
What also I think hits is Asan pointed this out. Shout out to Asan. We've had him on a couple of times. In the Wolverine, what also I think it connects these movies is in the Wolverine, that clairvoyant woman, she says, you're lying on your back with your holding your heart in your hands. It wasn't in the Wolverine, it was in this movie that comes to play, because Laura is his heart.
I'd forgotten about that, and then when I when I watched the Wolverine last night, I remembered. I forget where I heard it, but I did hear that somewhere, like shortly after seeing Logan for the first time. And I was like, oh, right. Yeah. It's that. I think I'd thought that like somebody said it in this and like just misremembered. But you don't need to have heard that line for it to hit. It means nothing.
Right.
Like, I don't know if this is a fair comparison, but like, I like the relationship that this movie has to what came before a lot more than like, I remember somebody told me this when what was it, WandaVision came out. They were like, oh yeah, that show's great because it makes Age of Ultron better in hindsight. And I was like, I know what you think that means and why that is like a perk for you.
Interesting.
That literally does nothing for, like, why is that the reason you like this thing? And like, there's a certain similarity there. And I think you could even say that for like, you could almost say that Logan makes X-Men Origins better in hindsight. But also, I don't know, like to a certain extent.
Is there
like,
a mute button?
I'm not saying that I agree with that. I'm saying that that take is like, you could kind of say that it's like, because like I had not seen either Wolverine movie, either of the other two before watching this the first time. But when I did go and watch them this week, I was like, okay, like it just kind of like gives you more time to understand the character. Like the plots of those movies gives you nothing really, but you just kind of understand where he's coming from in this a little bit more. So it's like useful in like, if you've been with the character that long, you kind of are being rewarded for that loyalty a little bit, or like that time is at least felt a bit more in this movie, I guess.
Well, that was all I had for my topic.
Okay, so let's move to your topic, Taylor. I think we may have already gotten into some of this.
Yeah, we dipped our toes in the water a little bit. But yeah, so I'm calling my topic everyone's tired. Basically, like my personal history with the X-Men movies, like I was a fan of the comics as a little kid. As much as a little kid can be a fan of comics, because you're like, oh, cool, like pretty colors, heroes fighting. Like you're not understanding like what it's actually like saying a lot of times. Transition to like the TV show I grew up on, like loved that. And then when X-Men was going to be, I had toys. When X-Men announced they were going to make a live action movie, I was like, I got to be there. I think it was like 12 or 13 maybe. Went and saw it in the theater, and it was a sold out theater except for 2 seats. So my dad and I went, but the seats were not next to each other. So like my dad and I just sat on like opposite ends of the theater. But seeing like the first X-Men on screen for the first time was such a thrill for someone who had grown up loving these characters. And even in the movie, there were characters I was not familiar with, like Toad. I didn't really know who Toad was. Not that he's like super like interesting character. He's just a weird guy with a tongue that stretches and grabs onto things. But I was like, oh, this is awesome. This is great. And I just kept being interested in it, and like saw the second one, like that one too. I never actually saw Last Stand until like a couple months ago. I watched it for the first time. But anyway, my history with this is that with Wolverine, before the movie's even coming out, being my favorite X-Men, I'm like, okay, this actor who's playing Wolverine, I am now invested in him because I like him playing Wolverine. I like his portrayal. And so I've kind of always paid attention to when a movie's coming out that has Wolverine in it. Then once we get into like the more Marvel non-X-Men stuff, and when that starts to get a big head of steam, and we're coming out with movies every year, and then 4 years after Iron Man we're having the Avengers and we're combining all of them. I'm like, this is fucking cool too. And then it keeps going, and it keeps going, keeps going. So I'm getting tired because it feels like it's like one a year or two a year of characters that I don't really have that much history with, but I'm still interested in it for the pop culture and the movie sake. And I would see them every now and then. Guardians would come out, but I don't know these guys. This looks kind of interesting and different. Let me check this out. But eventually things felt tired to me. But then eventually this movie, Logan, comes out. I'm like, okay, this is a character I love. I'm excited for it. The concept sounds super interesting. The trailer slaps so hard. The trailer for Logan is so good. And I was super interested in seeing it. And it was just such a breath of fresh air to me because, like I said before, it had stakes and it was grounded, and the story is actually small, and it didn't try to interconnect 6 other movies into this thing. And it got me feeling like this is kind of what I want. I want this like fresh take on a genre that already exists, because to me, things were getting stale. Again, like I said, we hadn't even gotten to Endgame or anything like that. That was a couple years later. But I felt like things were stale. And so with this movie being super small scale, with it being rated R, thanks to, I guess, like a test from Deadpool. Deadpool was like the test for like, can we do R-rated superhero movies that people will go see? And yes, I was totally into that. The violence was like perfect. Like as soon as somebody like gets stabbed in the skull, you're like, that's what's been missing in my life. I feel validated for seeing this. And then it's also a movie about like legacy and like, do we keep these stories going? And one of the things, as I was like typing up some notes and doing it a little bit more research on trying to better define my feelings, I was just looking at a bunch of video essays. The Nerd Writer had a particularly good one that I grabbed onto, just about the transition that a genre goes through when it gets tired. The 4 things that I'm reading off my notes now, the 4 things that it kind of classifies it as like burlesque, which is like parody, which is what Deadpool was. There's nostalgia, which it's a movie that might feel newer, but harkens back to a feeling that you might have felt watching a movie from like 30 years prior. There's something called demythologization, which is basically it plays the same story out up until the end, and then it pivots and subverts it and says, hey, there's no happy endings here. Like there's a lot of messed up stuff that's happening. And then eventually it gets to a stage where it's kind of a reaffirmation, where it does all of these things. It points out all of these tropes only for at the end to do it again, but it does it in such a way that makes you kind of like believe that's what needed. Like there's something fresh about it. And it actually, this video cites The Dark Knight, Evan, as an example of that. Is like, this is a movie that we've kind of seen all these tropes before. It's in a genre that is currently kind of in a heyday. And some people might get tired, but the way that this portrays a story is something that is fresh and exciting to people who do feel that way. And so for me, like with my personal history, I was just feeling super tired, and to have a movie like this where like it has an end to like a major character that I've loved for almost 20 years. The fact that it also plays around with, eventually my second or third time watching this movie, I kind of grasped onto this concept of the bad guys in this film are actually movie studio executives, and they're trying to clone Wolverine, aka they're trying to just reclone like the same superhero movie over and over again, and hoping that they will eventually like keep making money. But eventually things like, if it's a clone of a clone of a clone, it's crap. So I thought that was an interesting take that came to my mind. And that's just kind of how I feel about it. It's just there's so much about this movie that's different, but it still is a superhero movie. And a lot of my love for this movie does come from like a personal history of it, which is like not above critique, but something that some people might not have with a particular character.
So where does this movie fall on that list? The last one you mentioned?
Yeah, I think it's more of a reaffirmation because it's definitely not a parody. There's one moment that I absolutely love in this movie. It's when Richard E. Grant is giving his villain dialogue and he gets killed in the middle of giving his villain dialogue and is the most satisfying villain death I've ever seen. Even though he's like kind of a secondary villain, like he's framed as the big bad because he's Richard E. Grant. Like he's grandiose, like he's got gravitas. But home guy played by Boyd Holbrook, he's like more of the menacing guy that's always chasing them. But just the fact that like you have a superhero movie where the big bad is going to give a dialogue about his big plan, and that happens in every superhero movie, and he usually ends up delivering that entire monologue, and then he dies. In this movie, nope, he's in the middle of it.
My favorite version of my favorite version of a subversion of that trope has to be Shazam. When they are in the sky and he is giving his monologue to Shazam and he hears nothing.
He's like, what? That's a really good one. I forgot about that one.
I have not. The only reason I might is because it takes place in Philly, and I like sometimes seeing stuff that's in Philly because I know the skyline and stuff. I think I would hate it. I'm sorry.
The Museum of Art it's like a whole scene. Well, they're not in it. They're on like the steps. But.
Yeah, I've seen a couple of like clips and stuff. I have a vague sense of it, but I think I'd rather just rewatch Creed at that point, probably, because I know it's a good movie and it is hitting that same thing. Not to diss on that point, but yeah, no. I'm probably only gonna watch Shazam if you make me.
I had forgotten about that, Jelani. I remember laughing so hard in the theater when that was happening.
Yeah, that was so good.
I think my favorite, it's not a monologue thing, but in Spider-Verse 1, when they're like gearing up to fight that movie's Doc Ock, and then the bus, like, because they're in the multiverse mess, and then the bus comes out of nowhere and just clocks her, and they're like, oh, okay, guess we don't have to.
Yeah. And a movie can do that. And like in Shazam's like it's pretty much a comedy. Like it's a superhero movie, but it's meant to be a lot more lighthearted and meant to be funny, and not in like this is serious and now we have a quip way that Marvel does. Like it's very much supposed to be a comedy. And the way that Spider-Verse executes stuff like that, like it's that the Spider-Verse movies like balance everything so well, but it does tend to lean in more of the dramedy of things as opposed to the drama. With this one, it's like this is a movie, like this is a heavy movie, but it has moments of levity, both from a dialogue standpoint and then from these kind of, I don't know if you want to call it a meta occurrence of like the villain's going to do his thing, but then he gets killed in the middle of doing his thing because it's like a part of this like final showdown of everything. But it's not meant, we're not meant to pause and laugh because the action just keeps going.
I do appreciate the lack of comedy in this. Like, I think it maintains like the lightness enough, and like there's a couple of little like fish out of water moments with Laura, like in the convenience store, but like it's definitely, it doesn't feel like it needs you to laugh there, and if you don't, it's not like annoying. But I think that makes it like, we kind of talked about this on the last episode with like when we were talking about like what separates something from being mid, and I think some of it is just knowing what it like if a movie knows what it wants to be, and I think this does absolutely. Like it understands that like doing jokes, even though that was very much in vogue in superhero movies, like that same year, you had the DC movies going from Batman v Superman to Justice League, which I haven't seen the Joss Whedon version, but I hear there's some very cringe jokes in that. Like that's kind of what everyone else was like taking after Guardians, and this was like, I mean, I'm sure somebody pitched that at some point, but probably James Mangold and a couple other people. I think it's good they stuck to their guns and were like, no, we can't do that here. If we're going to have Logan die and the audience like crying with us, we can't have Robert Downey Jr. quips in this movie. It's not going to work. And again, like this is aimed at adults, and I think it like nothing else that I think has tried to aim itself at adults has like been able to commit to that enough and respect its audience as much as this movie does. To like, which isn't to say that it's like insanely heady. Like, I don't think anyone would have a hard time following it. The plot's very simple and everything, but it's respecting its audience. And this is kind of a separate point, but you pointed to this, Taylor. Like, there is no sequel bait. There's no crossover here. That this like it's allowing itself to end, which nothing else in this genre. Like every other part of X-Men and the MCU and DC, all of them are ramping up to their
and the Hasbro's verse.
The Hasbro verse. Dark Universe tried to launch like 2 months after this came out and flopped on its face.
Do you know how awesome that would have been if the Dark Universe was successful? Like with good, not to say you should. The Mummy was good, and that you should. I never actually saw the new one, but like, what if it was good? Like, what if we put attention into care into revamping all the classic monster movies? I would be in for that totally.
I think so.
Anyway,
but I think but I think with the way that this movie kind of handles what could be considered audience fatigue through a certain lens, I think it does all those things that I mentioned earlier of having something fresh, having something new, but still being like simple enough for you to follow. Because I mean, it's like you said, Johnny, it's a Western, and that is a genre, almost as old as movies itself. And so you're able to we as the audience are able to keep track of what's going on. We kind of understand the formula, even if we haven't seen that many Westerns. And I think it does end in a hopeful place with our basically like Gen Z mutants walking off into the Canadian sunset, which I think is really cool that we see them walk out of the frame, but we don't follow them. Because you could just you could take that as like, oh, we're actually going to keep making more of this, but it's going to be about Laura and all her friends. And I'm like,
which I would watch also.
I would, but yeah, I would, but no, this is the end. And I know this comes across as it could be super cheesy, and I recognize that it actually is cheesy in the movie. But when Laura turns the cross into an X, that's why I lose it. I'm done. I'm bawling my eyes out, and I'm like, it's the most obvious thing to do, and it's so cheesy, but it works so well for me.
I think that got everyone in the room when I first watched this. Everyone was
you're like, oh man, damn it, I'm not crying. But yeah, I mean, that's pretty much all I have to say about my topic. I ripped some points from the internet because a lot of people are better at articulating how I feel than I actually feel. But
it'd be like that.
Yeah, it'd be like that sometimes. But I think the impact of this movie is still, like I said, I watched it again for the third or fourth time very recently, and it still has a huge impact on me. But shout out to Stephen Merchant, who has one of my favorite lines. That was my favorite mug when Logan breaks his mug. I don't know why it's funny to me, but it's early in the movie, and he deadpan delivers it, and it's one of the funniest parts of the movie. I die laughing every time he says it, but I have no idea why it's so funny to me.
It's interesting to hear your point of view, Taylor, because I don't think I've ever discussed with anybody else the topic of superhero fatigue by this point. I've only seen a bunch of internet opinions that don't matter. So I was of the mindset that the only thing people were tired of is just middle of the road superhero movies. And TV, to be honest, especially TV shows, actually, because they take way more time out of probably the people making it and also the audience. With movies like the Spider-Verses, Logan, Guardians 3, well, really all of the Guardians, The Dark Knight, Black Panther, Wonder Woman, The Suicide Squad. Audiences know they can get more than mid when it comes to this genre, and consistently. And they've been voting with their wallets. I'm actually getting sick of hearing the term superhero fatigue. But when I think that's brought up, movies that come to mind aren't the movies I just listed. It's the movies like The Flash, Quantumania, and I haven't seen these, so I can't personally speak to them, but I haven't heard the greatest things about them. Morbius, Aquaman 2, The Marvels, and of course, Madam Web.
I think, yeah, there's that thing about, low tolerance. Yeah, it's fatigue, but it's more low tolerance for,
nonsense,
mid, like average, like less than average a lot of the times. But it's funny that for me, I was tired of superhero movies, specifically Marvel, when 2017 rolled around and Logan came out. Logan didn't fix the problem. Like nobody learned any lessons from Logan because they kept making stuff. But it's more of like after like the Infinity War Endgame, a couplet is when things kept going. But that's when like movies, TV shows, music, like they started to get treated as content, #content for businesses. And that's where like, okay, it's part of a machine now. Like we got to churn these out. People are going to get distracted by something that's not us. And I'm like, so like, what? They'll come back to you. Like,
I forget what company it was, but they said they wanted to focus on making second screen content.
Yes, I think we talked about this off air. It's Warner Brothers, and
was it Warner?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, with the homie.
I fucking hate that.
Yeah, that
mentality in studios. It's
second screen content. We don't want you to focus on us. We just want you playing us.
We want to focus on the thing that you're not focusing on.
Right.
I hate it so much, and I feel this might be slightly beside the point, but it is a superhero show. I don't watch the Harley Quinn show, but one of my roommates does on occasion, and sometimes I'll just like be there, like in the room making dinner or something for like a couple episodes, and I swear every 5 minutes there's some line that like tells you exactly what is happening. Like every 5 minutes somebody has some rambling line that tells you exactly what's happening, and I was like, what is this doing here? And I think I mentioned it to someone, and they were like, oh, it's because they assume people are on their phones. I'm like, I hate this. I hate this so much.
That. I found it funny, but other than that, I didn't notice that. Maybe that was past. I've only seen season 1, so maybe
I don't know. It probably was past season 1, but sorry for the rant. That's
no, it's okay. You're among friends.
Yeah,
you're preaching to the choir.
It's just not entirely on topic.
I think it is, though. I mean, like this whole idea of people being tired of the genre, like genre can. You can be outside of, it doesn't have to be a superhero movie. It doesn't have to be a Western. It doesn't have to be a specific subset of reality shows. Like when things are just oversaturated, we get tired of them, especially when we are told that we should care about it. When we're told by, whatever, marketing, the homepage of your favorite streaming platform. I can't count how many times I've opened Netflix and I've like scrolled vertically down and I see the same things like every third row. They're just reorganized. I'm like, y'all gotta be better about recommending stuff, because all these they have so much stuff, but they're not the things that might entertain audiences. I mean, I might be weird, different. You guys might be weird and different and want to see possibly something new, like every once in a while, as opposed to like, oh, here's something like something you've already seen. In fact, it's the spinoff of the thing you've already seen. Like one of my shows or types of shows I decompress to at the end of the day is like cooking competition shows. Like I'll have it on, and it does sometimes become second screen content because I have to like finish answering emails or something, but I know what happens every episode. I'll look up every once in a while and be like, oh man, I didn't know you could do that with an apple. That's crazy. And to just go about my day. But, I might not want to watch that even if it is a comfort thing, or when you go on YouTube and I need to search video essays on Logan to try and articulate my points. And I will start like the first two. And I'm like, oh, those are kind of cool. And then it's like, oh, but do you want to check out this video essay on Logan Roy, the character from Succession? I'm like, no, not at all. Like, I never watched Succession. I don't want to. Then something comes up from a search term I searched 2 months ago. I'm like, nope, I'm not interested in that right now. I'm focused on this particular task.
Yeah, it's like, but it's sad that it creeps over into stuff that feels like it should be immune from that.
Yeah,
and like. There's a phrase that Patrick Willems has used several times in some recent videos, which is like, studios have trained the audience to blank. Like and I think that's been mostly true with superhero movies in the past few decades. Like, once they realized what they could do with the crossovers, they started training audiences to want that. They started putting post-credit scenes in everything. And that's how you get an Ant-Man and the Wasp that could have been a post-credit scene, but was a whole $150 million movie. Yeah. Like, I think, and that was the landscape that Logan came out in. And I think it stands out because it feels immune to that. Even as good as it is, I think Spider-Verse is not immune to that. I think that is training audiences to understand what a multiverse is so that the machine can keep going. No shade to it, because it does it incredibly. But I think this is like, again, the fact that this just decides to end, I think is so bold, given that it was 2017 and what else was happening.
And isn't it weird to say that this movie had the balls to end?
Yes. But even stuff before that, like, how many actual endings have we, like, Dark Knight Rises, maybe, is like the only one that I feel like it, because we've never actually had a Spider-Man series come to its planned ending. Spider-Man 3 wasn't supposed to be the last one. Amazing Spider-Man 2 has about 2 gallons of sequel bait in it. And like, Tom Holland's not done yet, and the Spider-Verses aren't done yet. We've had 12 Spider-Man movies and 3 games, and none of them have actually ended the story for their Peter Parker or Miles.
Wow.
I was just like, that only occurred to me today. I was like, damn, we've never ended a Spider-Man. Or I mean, probably the comics have, but I haven't read any.
I was going to mention that this fatigue could be attributed to games as well. I was saying, like, people are so tired of safe when it comes to those, and the biggest example was to look at the reception of the Insomniac Spider-Man 2 game. People wanted more out of it. I think it had less playtime than the first, and
it felt shorter.
And there was people complained there was like so much more we could have done with it. Like, Evan, you've played through it, right?
Yeah, I have.
And have you, Taylor?
Yeah.
Okay. So people were upset. We pretty much got one and done with the black suit. Like, there wasn't even much time in the story with it before it was off of Peter again. So yeah, I can't think of Insomniac Spider-Man is the best thing that comes to mind. But there was also that, I don't know if it failed, but that Avengers game a couple of years ago.
I used to play the crap out of that.
That I didn't hear great things about. Taylor.
It is a mindless game.
Yeah.
It was a great way that I ended my day a lot of times. Like, I'd hop on and be like, okay, I'm going to be Hulk, and just like play multiplayer and just smash some bad guys up for like an hour and then go to bed. Like, that's the purpose it served for me. And it helped that, like, it had done a lot of downloadable stuff, which was a lot of fun, just to like try and keep things fresh, but I really didn't care. I was just in it to turn my mind off for a little bit. The story was like, I don't care. Like, I don't really care.
So yeah, I don't think it's just kept to that tiredness is just kept to the movies and TV.
Yeah.
I think to the point of like, maybe both of you have said it, like, are people fatigued or is it that stuff is too mid? I think there is like an extent to which it's both, but what I like about X-Men is it's this weird thing, because if you compare the X-Men series to the MCU, let's just say at this time, because I think 2020's MCU is a little bit of a different story, but the MCU sets a bar for itself and pretty much hits it every time. And occasionally they'll exceed it a little bit, but they never set it too high. X-Men is all over the place. They have their lows are really low, but their highs are higher than Marvel will ever allow themselves to reach. Like I think the closest we're ever going to get to like a Logan in the MCU is probably Wakanda Forever. And Wakanda Forever was never the plan because nobody wanted or thought that Chadwick Boseman was going to die as young as he did. So like, it sounds really cynical to say it, but it took a real life tragedy for the MCU to make a Logan. And for my money, like, Wakanda Forever does not work nearly as well as its own movie. As a eulogy to Chadwick Boseman, it's great. As its own movie, it does not hold a candle to Logan, I think.
I haven't seen it yet, but I will probably agree with you.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it depends on if you bump the same way that I did on it. But like, I always appreciate, and it's one of many reasons I'm upset about the Disney Fox merger, is that now X-Men, which we know can be incredible, is probably just going to be mid now because it has to fit in with the MCU and everything that they're doing. And like, I'll take I know this, I don't know if this is going to hit for people, but I will go see another Dark Phoenix before I will go to.
That was a wild movie. That was a wild movie.
Okay, yes. But I went to that like thinking that it could be Days of Future Past. Turned out it was not, but it could have been.
It was just The Last Stand too.
I'll take your word for it.
The funny thing about, after watching all these, like, the only one I skipped was Origins, and because I caught up, I actually did watch Apocalypse and Dark Phoenix. But going back to The Last Stand, I hadn't seen that until like recently, and I was like, oh, this is bad, but I'm like kind of laughing. Like, there's Joanna, you've seen it, right?
Yeah,
okay,
a couple of times. Yeah.
There's a moment, Evan, when the character of the Juggernaut is running through a bunch of people, and the sound of a bowling ball hitting bowling pins plays in the sound design. And I had to rewind it because I was convinced. I was like, no, they didn't do that, right? Why would they do that? It doesn't make any sense. But they did. And so I was like, okay, from here on out, I'm laughing at this movie.
And Marvel's like, the MCU is never going to do that. That's what we have Madam Web for. That's where it fits.
Man, yeah. I haven't seen Madam Web or Morbius.
I don't either.
I am a Venom fan. I will tell you that right now, because I'm leaning into the dumb buddy comedy of it all.
Okay, I don't blame people who like Venom. I personally don't enjoy the Venom movies, but
I'll say I enjoy Tom Hardy and Tom Hardy playing Venom in the Venom movies. Everything else in the movie I don't really care about, but
that's fair. No, the I haven't seen Madam Web either, but just the video essays or just video rants I've seen on it, they bore me too. Like, not even the people who are meant to make you laugh can really make me, because it's such a bad movie.
It feels like, I mean, this sounds like no duh. but there is just like an over reliance on like recognizable IP, and combine that with this content machine, combine that with us as consumers of pop culture feeling like we have to do homework in order to enjoy movies. Like it's this weird combination where like we're going to kind of make a thing and people are going to go see it enough to justify us to justify us to not learn any lesson about anything that didn't work and to keep doing it. Just thinking about this now, looking at my notes I have for Logan and going off of these different results that come from a genre possibly overstaying its welcome or evolving. When you talk about the reaffirmation stage of it always ends with a hopeful note. So like, the very end of Logan, the end of the kind of like the Dark Knight trilogy, there's kind of a little bit of hope in there too. I'm going to take the hopeful route. I'm going to hope that with this newly acquired X-Men stuff that Disney Marvel now has their claws into, I'm hoping that the people they're going to be in charge of making like X-Men movies, like this is X-Men, whatever, beyond 97. Basically, it could be new. It could be something new. Like, what if we actually tried? Like, what if we actually like took time and developed this? Because we still have a bunch of other MCU stuff like in our backlog that we're making. What if we actually took time and made like a really freaking great first installment of an X-Men movie without like shoehorning a Wolverine or a Cyclops or a Rogue or a Storm in somewhere?
Fantastic Four feels like it's gonna be along those lines, just based on what I've seen about it. But I hope so as well. We can't know until we see something.
Yeah. At this point, I don't think there are many more movies coming from Marvel or Disney that will immediately have me going to see in the theater. I'm definitely going to wait and see what critics and people like you guys are saying about the quality of it.
At this point, I pretty much just wait for any new superhero thing. I just wait for Jelani to make me watch it for an episode. And like, if I see it any other way, it's probably by accident, or somewhat by accident.
I think I was trying to think back. I think the last thing I saw in theaters was Across the Spider-Verse. But
really,
as far as MCU goes,
okay.
I think it was Wakanda Forever. That was what made me get out
for me.
And then after those two, they haven't gotten me back until this summer next month with Deadpool and Wolverine, because it's Deadpool and Wolverine. So, yeah, superheroes are mainly the MCU, but all of them, they're in a tricky place right now because people, as we've already stated, don't want to have to watch 10 episodes of a 6 to 10 episodes of a mid TV show to understand the next Avengers movie.
Yeah.
Which I believe is Secret Wars. I don't even know what that's about, honestly.
It's a secret. No one knows.
It's connected to Secret Invasion.
Right there. It was right there. Oh yeah, that was a show, wasn't it?
I saw that. I saw it.
With Olivia Colman of all people.
Yeah,
Olivia Colman. I mean, I love Olivia Colman.
I think so, and somehow that's the one that she signed up for.
Everybody's got to make money.
I guess.
She's in Paddington 3, so that's fun.
Yeah.
Non-MCU, I am hopeful for James Gunn's stuff. I'm trying to be on board from the beginning. Like, I have the feeling that DC stuff is going to be much more like the beginning of the MCU, where it's like everything kind of it's connected, but everything kind of feels like its own project, and they each movie, each show has a story to tell within this whole thing. And it starts, I think Creature Commandos is first, the animated show, but the first movie they're releasing is Superman next year, and I'm going there first night. I'm so excited.
It will be interesting I'm probably not going to watch most of them,
I'm gonna make you watch.
I am a little interested to see what they do. Sort of connected, sort of not. But Taylor, you've said a couple of times that you think studios haven't learned any lessons from Logan. I'm going to push back slightly. I don't know if they've learned the right lessons, but I think they have learned a little bit from it, because I think you don't get Joker without Logan. I think DC has started to kind of understand that, like, there's an audience for, like, more, we'll call it more mature superhero movies that are R-rated and kind of separate from things. I think Joker is not good in a lot of ways, but I think it is if nothing else, in a corporate sense, I think it is a spiritual sequel to Logan. I think in actual spirit of what Logan is doing, it is not. But that, I think, even the Batman, I think, is
I was just looking at that. Yeah,
like it's not quite the same, but I think it's similar in the sense that it's taking a character that we've seen a lot of and trying to kind of put a new face on it. It's obviously not trying to end anything, but it's not connecting to any previous stuff and not really trying to tie into any, like, all we know is there is a Batman 2. It's not connected to other stuff. And it's a director who is given, like, a lot of creative control over it, which I think is fair to say that, like, James Mangold seems like he has a decent amount of creative control here. He also did the Wolverine, which I don't see a whole lot of creative similarity there, so maybe not, but I think there is, like, an extent to which other movies have sort of followed in this one's footsteps, maybe not to the greatest effect, unless you're Warner's studio execs. David Zaslav probably loves what's his name, Todd Phillips, for what he did with Joker. But
yeah, I could see them being boys. No, I understand what you're saying. Yeah, definitely there have been a few more recent or post Logan superhero-ish films, superhero-related films that have the kind of restrained, more focused, might be a good way to put it. I don't want to say gritty, because I feel like that is reserved for almost the Nolan Batman trilogy. It's kind of weird. Like, when the Batman came out, I was like, oh, another one.
Yeah.
I feel like, all right. And I watched it, and it was good. But but that still, to me, is like, oh, we're starting this again. And it's still gritty, but it's a little different, like that. And it wasn't bad at all. Like, I thought it was a good movie. Joker was a little weird for me. Like, I thought technically it was a really good movie, but at the end of the day, I wasn't, like, wowed or super impressed by anything it had to say.
it was just depressing.
I mean, yeah, and I love depressing shit sometimes, and this was just one of those things where I was just, I don't know, probably maybe it wasn't quite for me. But yes, there have been things that have come out post Logan that studios have maybe looked at a movie like Logan and applied some of the principles. But I think for the majority, I feel like we're kind of still trotting the same trails that we have been.
Yeah. Although maybe that's changing, given how hard a lot of stuff flopped last year. So
yeah,
I think there's a chance that maybe there will be other lessons that they take from Logan. Although it's a few years removed, so that might not be the thing they're looking to. If we're good to move into my topic, I don't want to step on the discussion we were having, but I think
I was like, has Evan talked about his topic? I don't know. I've lost track of who we're talking about now.
It's cool. And I think we can continue it here, because I kind of mentioned a couple of the things that we've talked about so far. My topic is purposeful edginess.
Love it.
I think to like to keep on what we were talking about before a little bit, like to compare to other like grittier R-rated superhero content that has come out since then, and a little bit before too with Watchmen. I think this earns like or justifies its edginess and violence more. And there's a few reasons that I think it does that, but I want to pose that question to you guys first. So, one, do you think it does? And if so, why or how does this warrant its dark tone, or maybe depressing more than dark, and its violence more than other things?
Yeah, I think it's justified. I mean, it's a movie about a dude with knives in his hands. Like, how is this not going to be violent? Like, we've seen all these X-Men movies. He's got, there's no blood like in any of these X-Men movies, like ever, as resulting from Wolverine, unless like he gets like a cut on his face, or he will like gingerly cut something. Like that's when we see like a nick of something on blood. And so it was so refreshing seeing it in the theater. And the first thing is like some dude just gets his freaking arm chopped off, and then a claw goes through someone's head. And I'm like, this is awesome. And a lot of people forget like this has existed before, but it was before things were super, super franchised. Like people forget about Blade. People forget a lot about the Blade movies. But yeah, like I think it's purposeful because it's not existing as like a gimmick of like, hey guys, rated R, like look, violence, it's actual, nothing like that. Like it makes sense for the character, it makes sense for the story. It also serves as it almost feels like this is all the violence we've been missing. So now we have to show it all to you, because this is kind of what Logan has been through. We just haven't seen it because it's been toned down, for PG-13 audiences.
For 17 years since his first appearance.
He's got all this pent-up rage, and we're just going to let it all out.
He does yell a lot in this movie.
Oh, yeah, there's a lot of...
It probably hurts, too. He's old. It hurts every time. I remember the very first movie, like, I think it was Rogue that asked him, like, do those hurt when they come out? And he says, every time.
I was thinking about that the entire time watching those movies. Like, it just hit home for me, like, watching all three movies within a week. I was like, pain is just so central to this character. Like, it always has been. And, like, that first line, I guess it hits because it stuck with me. I don't know how long it's been since I saw X1. But, like, I did kind of think of it every time the claws came out. I was like, that probably hurts really bad.
Yeah. And he's a character, like, beyond, having adamantium grafted onto his skeleton, like, he's someone as a character who has gone through, like, a lot of emotional pain, too. And so just everything hurts. And he's angry. And I get it, man. Like, that's, I think, and to have this visual representation of all the pain that he's going through makes a lot of sense. And for this to be, rated R makes like the most sense to me.
Took the words right out of my mouth, man. I'm so glad they went all out. Like you said, Wolverine, he has swords that come out of his hands, and for 17 plus years, they somehow skipped by the natural violence that comes from that. Even I've never watched the OG 90s cartoon, but I've heard that he fights robots in that, like not people, so they get by on the violence in that. And then in the live action, since we got Hugh Jackman, it's either been in the dark or it's against robots, or they just don't show blood even though he's stabbing somebody through the neck. The closest I think we got to anything like any of his berserker moments in this was the X2 scene at the mansion. This naturally lends it it had to be edgy. Like at some point they had to give us this Wolverine. I don't know how soon it was going to be, but I'm so glad because in the games, there's a game out there. I've mentioned games in 2 different topics. There was a game that came out. I forget the year, but it's called X-Men Origins Wolverine, based on the game. But there was an uncaged edition. So I had a version based on the movie that I had for. Listen, I liked the movie as a kid. I didn't realize how bad it was. I was just hyped to see a Wolverine film. And once I saw they had a game for it, I was like, oh, immediate buy. And I was a little disappointed by it. A bunch of things in that, more than half of the stuff in that game had nothing to do with the movie. But there was an uncaged edition for the next gen console, the Xbox 360. And that had little nothing really to do with the movie. But the difference was the PlayStation 2 version was rated teen. The uncaged edition was rated M. And it gave us everything. There was executions, there was environmental kills, and all the blood you can ask for. Like there's one where you grab a guy and you step on his foot, crushing it, flattening it, because adamantium skeleton, and while he's standing still, he slashes up and rips the dude's head off. It's so great.
It sounds satisfying. It sounds really satisfying.
I that Insomniac, as I've already mentioned, the company, they're making a Wolverine game, and it has to be rated M. I need more of this brought into the current gen consoles, because one, I've been on this channel for a while. Audience probably knows by this point. I really like violence for whatever reason. That is the game I'm looking forward to the most, aside from the Cyberpunk sequel. So yeah, the violence is very, very warranted and it's much appreciated. Very much appreciated.
I think beyond violence too, hearing Professor Xavier drop an F-bomb is one of the most refreshing things I've ever heard in my life. Like this dude he's old, he's senile, he's suffering from some type of dementia. Like, yes, I would be cursing out whoever is helping me, even if they're doing it, for good reason. Like he's a crotchety old man now, and him dropping an F-bomb, I was like, oh, this is great. I love this. Like it makes sense.
Everybody in this movie is dingy and in pain. And yeah, they'd be swearing the whole time. I don't think that he has a glamorous damn shot in this movie. Either one of them, Logan or Professor X. Like, yeah, it makes a whole lot of sense for its rating. It's so good.
Yeah, I think one of my first notes that I wrote down while watching it was like, man, everyone's just tired and miserable in this movie. I wrote that
and isn't that great?
It's so good.
Well, and I think it's great for these characters too, because namely the 2 returning characters, because if you'd been living for 200 years and had taken thousands of what should be mortal wounds, you'd be exhausted. And you just Hugh Jackman, I think, does a great job with his performance. I think for one thing, every time he is going up to a stranger across any X-Men movie, he has this implied eyebrow raise where they're he's like, you really don't want to mess with me today, bud. He either says that out loud, or he just plays it in subtext with everyone.
You can hear the sigh. Even if he doesn't give a sigh, it's just the standoff scene in the cornfield with the I'm just gonna call them the a-holes because I don't remember their names. When he said, "Okay, what happens next?" or whatever, and then he starts counting, and Wolverine just slaps the gun from it and just snaps, and I was just like, "Yes." This he's 200. He's too old for this. He's 200 years old. He's too old for this. Stop with your guns and What are we doing here?
Well, and even the opening scene, like that scene doesn't need to be there, except that it absolutely has to be there to just tell you what the movie's gonna be.
Yeah.
Of like, all right, he's gonna like, there's gonna be a lot of blood. We're gonna see the decapitated limbs, and like in in that first scene, I think he like when he's going up to the guys, he's just like, I don't want to do this today. Like
he's more worried about the car getting shot than himself.
That was so funny. Him being worried about the car was one of the. It's one of those things where it's like it's probably not supposed to be funny, but it kind of is. Like that's kind of it's this type of sadness and ridiculousness that he's worried about the car over what's happening to him.
Like, bro, if they didn't know, or they didn't know, like. If he wasn't Wolf, they would have killed just a random old guy for being there. And he got up and he was like, he still was like, guys, you're gonna strip the wheels. And they're like, why are you alive? It was. You need the opening. You need all of it. Not a thing should have been cut from. Yes, all of it. It was
the way that the title of the movie comes up in that scene is really perfect. Like he is like he got knocked down. He tells him to stop or whatever. They knock him down immediately, and he's on the ground. He's like, "Fuck!" And the title comes up like right to the side. Like, yeah, this is Logan. This is who we're dealing with.
Here's what the movie is, guys. This isn't like I feel like that scene is just there to be like, yeah, this isn't the other Wolverine movies. Buckle in. There's gonna be some shit in this movie.
Mm-hmm. And at the same time, it just also does a lot of character work too, because it shows that he's tired. It shows that he's still also not caring about himself. Like he's never really cared about himself. His only thing he's cared about is like being detached because people he likes gets hurt. But like, that's the extent of it.
I think amid all of like the violence though, it does feel like, and you guys were kind of pointing to this earlier, like, everything we got before this was toned down. It feels organic. It doesn't feel like, there's a lot of blood in this movie. It doesn't feel like an excessive amount because it's as much as there would be. Like to compare again to like some other R-rated superhero stuff like The Boys, Zack Snyder's Watchmen, and Deadpool, Invincible. Yeah. All of those, I feel like they're, like when there is an excessive amount of blood, it like wants you to know and be like, look at how bloody this is. I never feel that as the undertone in this movie. It just feels like, yeah, this is what happens when Wolverine stabs people. We just needed to please the ratings board for the past 15 years. Like it doesn't feel like it's like reveling in the gore the way that like Tarantino does, or I think The Boys does it a lot out of all of those things, and Zack Snyder does it too. But I think that helps because then it makes it feel like it again, I think just like adding jokes would have, making the violence too glorified would be antithetical to what this movie's trying to do. Like you need to feel the pain that Logan is going through. And I think probably most of the blood that we see in this movie is Logan's, is probably more than the people that he's slicing up. And like, that's there to just be like, yeah, he's bled insane amounts just from enduring every wound that he's had to.
That one makeup effect where he was at the doctor's office and he had his shirt up and he had like 4 different gashes in his, but it wasn't bleeding. It was just
even the scene earlier than that, like after the limo confrontation where he's in the bathroom, like making the bullets come out of him, like it looks fucking real. Like like I've never seen that happen, but I imagine that's what it would look like. Like it wouldn't be. I attribute like violence in The Boys, or going back to like the Blade movies too. Like it's part of the aesthetic, like it's part of the art, like it's a display, like it's artistic interpretation of bodily fluids, which is like weird, but but this movie is like that's not what Logan is. This is like the real shit.
Yeah, I feel like his performance in that early scene when he's pushing out the bullets too, like, and again, especially if you've seen other movies with him in it, like that scene in like the equivalent scene of that in Days of Future Past, he's just like, "Whoop, okay, all the bullets fall on the floor, and he kind of like grimaces at the dudes he's about to slice up. Compare that to when he's in the bathroom pushing, like he's like forcing them out, and he just feels so old. And like I feel like that's the moment where you feel his age. He just feels like an old guy who
even when he's sorry.
Yeah, no, I mean that's pretty much it. Go ahead.
Even when he's fighting himself, the X-24, like he loses both times, and you feel every single stab that he receives on that end, because you know it's not healing right then and there. You know he has to, I don't know how he does it, concentrate on it or whatever, but it's basically like a more durable human. It's not, you know, young Wolverine popping out the I felt so bad, and the screams, the guttural screams every time.
Yeah,
it was great though, so great.
I really liked one of my favorite death scenes in this movie is actually when all the kids gang up on one of the henchmen, and the girl makes like the vines come out of the ground and just like,
oh yeah, when she earth bends at them.
Oh
yeah.
man, so cool. I was like, and then everybody else is in on it too, like helping him out. Shout out to the chubby kid with the Wolverine t-shirt on who has like electric powers, which is like, I thought he was so cool because he's running so fast, but he's not running fast, but he's trying so hard to run.
You know, I didn't recognize the other name, Dominic Petros, that's who Richter got his powers from, but he, I think, got the powers from Christopher Bradley, who was Bradley, I think, in X-Men Origins Wolverine, who was the first guy, if you guys remember, that Sabretooth goes after with the light bulb.
Oh yeah,
that kid has his powers.
Okay, I just remembered him as Merry from Lord of the Rings because it's that actor.
Oh, Dominic Monaghan.
Yeah, I think Jelani, you haven't seen Lord of the Rings, so I know.
No, I've seen him in other stuff.
Okay.
I think he's
X-Men Origins. Yeah, Dominic Monaghan was supposed to be a character called Beak, and he didn't have electric powers, and then they just gave him electric powers in the movie for some reason. So
was this because he was kind of cool, annoying because you know he was one of the villains, but kind of cool. Was the cybernetic dude, the guy they killed at the end with the vines, was he based off of anybody?
The guy that got killed, I thought he was just one of the mercenaries who
is just the henchman.
Just one of the many alkali henchmen.
Oh, okay. I thought he could have been based off of like some character in the comics that maybe.
I mean, maybe I'm not. Yeah, not an I'm never really an avid reader of the comics, except when I was a kid. And when I was a kid, like I was just understanding the bare bones of who the people were.
Yeah, I was just curious. On the topic of purposeful edginess, I don't ever mind edginess as long as it's done well or the creators are self-aware of what they're doing. For example, this is going to go off the rails. Stay with me. This is a trailer for this game I just saw called Killer Bean. You still with me?
I have seen the poster for this thing.
BEAN?
Yep, Killer Bean.
I'm in. Let's do it.
Every character in it is a walking, talking bean. Are you still with me?
Yep.
Okay. The main character, I think his name is Killer Bean, was betrayed by an organization he used to be a part of, and now he's out to hunt them. And in the trailer, you see him. He's got this really like sick of this nonsense, like gruff voice. But like he sounds like the they pulled me back in type of guy.
Okay.
So in the trailer, you see him doing things like diving out of a window in slow motion and turning to shoot another guy in another window, catching a live grenade and putting it between his legs like a basketball before throwing it back, and breakdancing and spinning as a bunch of goons try to shoot him. The point of me mentioning that is it's so seriously unserious. In that case that the creators are very self-aware of what they're making. I don't get the same exact vibe with this movie. Obviously, Wolverine is not breakdancing to avoid gunshots, but I mentioned that on the point of like purposeful. That's a different kind of purposeful edginess. I like this as long as it's done well is my point. I think there are different approaches to adding edginess to anything. You have the Invincible route where it's never supposed to be pretty and it can be gratuitous. You have the Killer Bean route where it's seriously unserious. You have this route where it's taken seriously, but there's a real approach to it and how the violence is done. Check out Killer Bean. I don't know anything about it, but I remember seeing that trailer and was weirdly intrigued.
I feel like I want to play it already. That sounds awesome.
Yeah.
I think I think the self-awareness is kind of an important thing. Like, I think this movie is taking itself seriously and doing that well. But again, to compare to Zack Snyder's Watchmen, I think that is trying to take itself seriously, but Zack Snyder just wants to show some cool gore, or like he wants to do his Zack Snyder thing. And people always point to how that's like completely antithetical to what that story is meant to be. Like the way he shoots that movie is very antithetical to what that story's about. Which I think is a problem there. Joker, I think tonally also, it doesn't do this with the violence, but I think it is not self-aware, and that is a lot of people's problem with it, is that it's just kind of angsty, but it's acting like it's about something. And if you really dig into it, what is it actually saying? I may need to rewatch it before.
It's not funny to make fun of people. You gotta. Come on, Evan. I'm here. You're not here, Evan.
Yeah, but I don't know. I think I'd have to watch it again to really dig into that. But that's always like the vibe that I've always gotten from it, is that it's just kind of angsty and wants to be taken seriously, but like it doesn't really back that up with anything. And then you have like, I don't want to say the boys' violence isn't like earned, but I feel like it's there for shock value and not to like be, oh, look at how realistic. Like I think they're just kind of there for the
just the sound effects are just over the top sometimes.
Yeah. But the shock is a part of it though, because these quote unquote heroes are actually shitty people, and so the awful things that they do. And so that to me, it's definitely for shock factor to get us talking about it. There's a gross artistry to it, but it definitely has intention, I think.
Yeah, I don't want to say it's completely purposeless there, but I think it's definitely a different there's a different goal in mind than the violence here, and for my money this works better. So I appreciate it for that. Like, I think I would be open to hearing somebody critique this for like indulging too much in the violence. I kind of don't think it does. Like, you could say there's more action scenes than there need to be, but I think it has a good ebb and flow with it. And
I wouldn't ever need to speak to whoever that hypothetical person is. Whoever thinks there's too much.
I think the level of violence in this is equal to No Country for Old Men, honestly. Like, the violence that's there is like pretty rough, but it's not the whole, it's not the whole movie. And it happens like in moments that are like, it's required to show, like, yes, you hold up a cattle prod air gun to somebody's forehead. This is what that looks like. Like, it has intention, but nothing about it. Yeah. There will be people like you said, Evan, that might be a little more prudish than us and not want to see any kind of violence whatsoever. But I feel like it's intermittent enough to like be over it by the time the scene's actually over, because then you don't get another, gory detail for another 30 minutes or something, or 20 minutes.
Yeah. And like you guys said before, like the other movies have like shied away from it. Like this is what was happening in every other movie with Wolverine. This is just the only one to show it. Mm-hmm. So I think like it almost feels like I think one of you pointed to like we kind of needed it to be this much because of how many years and movies this wasn't shown. Which is different than like I don't know, something with an equal level of violence that like do we need another war movie at this point that is like hyper violent? Like we've had Saving Private Ryan, we've had Hacksaw Ridge, probably a couple others in there. I don't know that for that genre we need another hyper violent war movie. We've gotten the point. Like if you're going to do that, if you're going to make a critique in a war movie or like say something that's been done, so do something else, I think.
What else is there to say? I haven't watched a whole lot of more war movies, but what else is there to say other than war is bad?
I think it can kind of depend on because I kind of thought that going into 1917, and then 1917 turned out to be really good.
1917, that's a really good movie.
Is the message not war is bad in that? Is war is good?
It is war is bad. It's more of the things we'll do to stop unnecessary killing.
Okay.
Which is
I think it's a valuable story in terms of its message. Yeah, it's not saying anything new. It is saying it in a fresh way, is what I'll give it. But maybe that's not the fairest comparison. But I think like there is context required, or I think the context lends a different light to this, because especially at the time this came out, like superhero movies do tend to sanitize their violence, and I don't think it would work forever. Like I never want to see an R-rated Spider-Man movie. I probably, if they put one out, I'd probably go see it. I feel like that is kind of antithetical to the character, whereas R-rated Wolverine, here for it. R-rated Batman, we probably should have that at this point.
Yeah.
I thought the Batman was
the Batman was R, wasn't it?
No.
Really? Wow.
But it wanted to be. It really wanted to be. I think the only other note I had for this is just, I think tonally, things are balanced out well with like, you have the like opening probably 40 minutes of this where everyone's just miserable and tired. But I think that's balanced out well with Laura and all of the other like mutant kids who are like there's a hopeful ending, like you mentioned, Taylor, to this movie. And I think there's enough hints of that throughout. Like Laura's slashing people up as much as Logan is in this movie, but there is still kind of a like hopeful, there's a hope to her, and like a bit of a naivety to her that I think still, and even to Charles at certain points, where there's a lightness without it having to be like, there's no like funny moments in this, but there's respites. There's the whole detour to the farm with the other family, and I think that is important to the tone and to balance out the edginess with like, there's some dynamics there. It's not just sad all the way down, and you do end on a hopeful note, which I think earns that like more like depressing opening of this, to make it like, if you want it to be realistic, like you have to have some dynamics there or the audience is going to get tired and the death at the end isn't going to hit. So you can like, ultimately a lot of characters survive this movie, but like, you know, all the mutant kids do. Literally everyone else dies that has a name in this movie, and about 100 characters who don't.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh
I mean,
God.
the dynamics themselves make anything interesting. That's actually one of the things I was thinking about when I was watching Dark Phoenix. And the same with Apocalypse, is that there's a lot of like visually, there's a lot of cool moments to see. But those two movies are kind of like event based. Like, we're going to have a small scene that has some kind of emotional value. We think, like the writer or the studio thinks, and then some quips. And then here's an event that happens. Like in Dark Phoenix, like the whole, like the Phoenix thing happens in the spaceship in the first 5 minutes of the movie. And it feels like the climax of the movie. Like, it feels like this big thing we've been waiting for, but it's really just the start. And if that's at the start, like, do you top it? No. So you just keep repeating like the same level of intensity sporadically throughout a movie. And so that's how I felt about these last two X-Men installments in the X-Men franchise, current X-Men franchise. There's more of an occurrence of like event-based movies, event-based scenes. Like, every scene has to be like this big thing. And I don't know if that's like an international box office influence or something, where it's all about spectacle. With the same, Zack Snyder's been criticized a lot for being like very like a spectacular like filmmaker, not as in like awesome, but like that's what he's focused on. He's focused on these big visual elements with slow motion and epic music, which is like really cool to see. But if your entire 90-minute, 120-minute, 150-minute, like whatever climb keeps going, is if it's all that, then it's not interesting, because there's no dynamics, like you were saying, Evan.
Yeah, I think maybe this isn't exactly what you're pointing to, but I think a problem that a lot of people had with X-Men Apocalypse is that you were saying, like, if you start so big, where do you go from there? I think that happened with like the character Apocalypse, because he does this thing in his intro where he like just kills like 4 people basically, like out of nowhere. Like, I think he like there's like some kind of sand effect thing, and it like cuts their throats, I guess. And then he never pulls that move out for the rest of the movie. So when they're all fighting him at the end, like, I think they still do some good power scaling there, but it's like, okay, but we know you can just like snap your fingers and kill like 6 regular people. Is there anything like why are you not doing that to Quicksilver right now? Like, and I think that maybe is a separate problem, but it's like it's setting the bar too high and then refusing to hit it again, kind of. Maybe it's not entirely related, but I think having like, the Zack Snyder comparison is probably a better one. Of like, I've said this about him before. He just like does he tries to make every shot as awesome as possible, and then you forget about 80% of them because it all blends together.
And the shots are odd. Like, you look at like, I am impressed by what I am seeing. I saw this 5 minutes ago, though. Like,
That's why I think he just needs someone to tell him no. Because if he was like restrained properly, I think he could be a great director. He just has been given way too much creative control and is just like, all right, cool, trailer shot, trailer shot, trailer shot, trailer shot, and that's the whole movie.
So are you guys saying this movie goes from a high to low to that same high, or high to low to a higher high?
I think it builds.
So
I think it's dynamic enough so it kind of like, it's not a straight upward slope toward one moment. It does have like ups and downs as far as if you want to go with like levels of visual intensity or something like that. But it builds. Like, there's a big, the first action scene in Logan is it's kind of comical and sloppy, but still memorable and violent.
Mhm.
And then we don't, and even the escape scene from their like Mexican hideout is not perfect. They have a lot of trouble getting that limo out of there. And then the limo chase scene with the train, that's cool too. And then we have a break. Like we have a road trip. Then we have a road trip movie. Then we have the stuff in the casino. Then we have another thing where we're just helping people on the side of the road. Like it varies things up. And each kind of, if we're using violence as a measurement of these kind of like events, then each violent event is different than the one before it, and they ultimately lead up to like the big showdown that's at the end of the movie.
I think it happens with like I guess like the mood of the characters too. Like you spend the first like 20 minutes ish establishing their like day to day, which is kind of miserable. But you balance that out with the inciting incident of Gabriella coming to them and like providing, and you even have like the balance of they have like Logan has a goal of getting enough money to buy this boat for him and Charles. I think if you don't have that, then that opening 20 minutes and really the whole movie, like I don't know if anyone watching this believed that the movie would end with the two of them riding off on a boat. Maybe some people did. I don't. Maybe I just had the death spoiled for me, so I knew. But I was like, "Yep, that's never going to be a shot in this movie." But I think it does work there because you need to like show us that these characters like have some kind of purpose to balance out the like just Charles being seen and like rolling around his water tank thing. And then later on the scene where they like go and stay with the family, I have a little bit of an issue with it just because really they should move on. I think it does a lot of work for like it's a good character moment, so I'm fine with it staying. But I think like it does tonal work as well of just like here's a respite before we get into act 3 as like everyone dies. Like it's pretty hard to give any kind of emotional investment in characters that are only there for maybe 15 minutes. Could be closer to 20, but like these new randoms who I don't think they even like, do they give them names? Probably, but
I just know it's Eric LaSalle. That's all. The actor's name. I just know the actor's name. So
right, none of us could name the characters like the character names with a gun to our head. But
Nate Munson.
Munson sounds right.
Munson does sound right.
Nate Munson. Nate's the son. I don't remember the dad's name, and I feel like the mom's Munson. Her name started with the V. I feel.
At that scene,
case, we get invested in those characters at least somewhat. Maybe not like super invested, but we spend some kind of time with them so that like they're like before they get killed off, we've had a light moment to like get to know them, and it's meaningful for the other like the main 3 characters as well.
Going back to what you were saying, Evan, about you didn't anticipate this movie ending with Logan and Charles riding off to the sunset on their boat. I didn't hear this until recently, but watching it and thinking about it had like it kind of clicked to me is that an implied theory is that once they get out into the boat, he'll stop medicating Charles and they'll both just like end up dying. Or that's where Logan also kills himself with the adamantium bullet.
But I think that's a valid enough theory if true. He still is like trying to buy the boat. Like there are
like that's the goal. Yeah, for sure.
Doing that. So it's not just like a thing. Like it's not just a story he's telling Charles to like placate him. Like he has that scene where he's like, I can give you 45 grand cash. No. And so, but I only mentioned that to like point to the dynamics that we're talking about. Like, I think it's in a lot of ways, you forget about that by the end of the movie, especially because Charles dies 75% of the way through. But it's still doing work there, even if it never really matters. It's kind of like contributing to just like, here is like some form of hope for these characters. So it's not just depression for 30 minutes to start us out.
Yeah.
That was the end of my topic. Did you guys have anything else?
Nah, I said everything I had.
Yeah, I mean, I could talk about this movie for another hour, but like we've said everything we need to say.
I'm a little surprised we went as long as we did. Although, to be fair, a lot of that time was talking about like the broader trend. But I'm good with that because I think this is a good
Killer
lens
Bean.
And Killer Bean.
I'm gonna check that out, man. Have you heard of a movie called Rubber?
I have.
Fire?
Yeah, that's what you describing. That reminds me of Rubber a little bit.
Yeah. I think there are Killer Bean movies because I know I've seen like friends log it on Letterboxd. There was a minute where like several of my Letterboxd people that I follow were logging, and I was like, "What is this?" I don't know if it started as a video game and became a movie, but it's from like 2010.
Fascinating.
I think there are multiple of them. I don't know how many, but this was not the first time I've heard it mentioned.
That's fascinating.
Okay. So we'll move into the outro, the boilerplate. Our upcoming episodes, we're gonna do Would You Rather and Godzilla -1.
Yes.
Not sure what order. Yeah, Jelani's been telling me that I need to watch that, and
so good,
I've heard many good things from other sources as well.
I already have my topic for it. That's how you know I'm ready.
Yeah.
Nice.
No, I've heard it's great. I'm glad it's finally available. On our YouTube channel, we have the Big Robots Trend video out. I think this is the first podcast we've done since that. So if you haven't seen it yet, go check that out. 30 minutes. You really don't need to have seen any of the movies
It's worth
that
the
I
watch.
talk about.
It's got my seal of approval.
Yes.
In case you needed that.
Yeah, and we have our Patreon for $1 a month with watch-alongs and bonus episodes. Our logo's by Kelsey Hendry. Jelani, I'll start with you for where you're at, and Taylor, I'll let you plug your stuff as soon as he's done with that.
Instagram, Jelani T. Kelly. YouTube, Jelani T. Kelly. I still have my old skits up there. That's it.
Nice. Yeah, you can find me personally on Instagram at Tay D Adams, and you can check out the Film Nuts podcast on Instagram and TikTok at Film Nuts Podcast. And our episodes are available wherever you get them. You know, YouTube, Apple, Spotify, wherever. I feel like the platforms are always multiplying, but just search the Film Nuts podcast, and if you see a little squirrel icon, that's us.
Yes, and I will say, if you are trying out the Film Nuts podcast for the first time, if you have seen Ocean's 11, that's a recent episode that I would recommend, but do watch it first. The one I would recommend for everyone trying it out is The Bachelor. I have not seen The Bachelor. I really love
Throwback
the Film Nuts episode of The Bachelor. Like, I'm probably never going to watch that show, but it did, like, your guest on that did give a very new light to it that I had never considered.
Thanks, man. I'll tell Katie. She'll get a kick out of that. That's awesome.
Yeah. No, Taylor, if you want to like explain it, like it's an interview based show, so it's not quite like ours, but you know it is another movie podcast, which is
sure. Yeah, I'll give the quick pitch. Yeah, so the Film Nuts podcast is a show about why we love what we watch. It is more about the connections we feel to the media we love to watch, and in turn, by listening to someone talk about it, we hopefully can connect to the person who talks about it as well. So it's all about learning more about each other, and so we don't fight so much, unless it's a friendly fight about, you know, superhero movies or something.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. So thanks for watching, and Taylor, thanks for coming on as a guest.
Thanks for being here, Taylor.
Yeah, thanks for the invite, guys. This was a lot of fun.